When we talk about gender inequality, concepts such as salary disparity, women domination by men, social injustice often surfaces. However, there are subtle attributes which are ingrained deep into the social fabric of the society we live in, which has far deeper consequences. These subtle attributes are less visible, but at the same time, they shape our perception, influence our decision-making process, and perpetuates gender bias, which without even we realizing it, we do it. In her book Invisible Woman, author Caroline Criado Perez talks about such selective data biases, which has created over centuries a world catered to men at the expense of women, comfort, health, and safety. In this video, I'll talk about 10 such examples. My hope is through these examples, we all can see such subtle gender biases, which will provide all of us to create an equitable world for all genders in the future. Would you ever imagine that human skeleton could be subject to gender bias? Well, there is one going on for centuries. This is about a 10th century Viking skeleton known as Burka warrior. This skeleton, despite having a clear indication of a pelvic bone, has been called out to be a male skeleton because alongside the skeleton they found weapons and 2 sacrificed horses, and according to historians and archaeologists, warriors could be only men. In 2017, they did a DNA test and found that indeed the skeleton was of a woman, but then the narrative was changed by the historians. They said probably there was a misplacement of woman bone alongside a warrior bone. This is an example of classic bias where we believe that when it comes to warrior, it could be only men. If you truly look at the Vikings' histories through mystical stories and all, you will find that female warriors are upteen number of times mentioned, yet we put a blind eye towards it. If emoji is a language, it would be the fastest growing language in the world, with 90% of the world population using it. It was first invented in Japan in 1980. And when it was first created, it was created gender neutral. Every platform that uses these Unicode characters, they implement in their own manner and fashion. And slowly up until 2016, when it was used, all of the icons created were mostly men. For example, police officer would be a man, a running figure emoji is a man. However, it is used in a gender neutral way for both men and women. Well, that changed in 2016 when Unicode taken notice of that, and then they introduced a gender-based icon where you have now a female runner, a male runner, a female doctor, and a male doctor. Such are the integrate gender biases when this innocuous language was created for online users, for digital users. People thought that when the platform will be implemented by different implementers, they will not include a gender bias, but it is ingrained in our mind and hence it was created accordingly. 13th to 17th century is considered as Renaissance period, but according to author Carol Travis, who wrote in 1991 the book Mismeasure of Women, clearly indicates that we should rebrand that as Renaissance for men because women were not allowed to take part in any craft or artistic endeavor. Similarly, the 18th century is the period of enlightenment. But if you truly see, it should be the period of enlightenment for men because women were not allowed to own property, they were not allowed to go for higher education, neither they could own money at large. Again, Greece has been seen in the ancient world as the creator of democracy, but sadly, during that period of time, women were not even allowed to vote. These are some of the subtle behaviors which has perpetuated and being in the system for a long period of time, which influence the behavior we show today. In Karlskog, Sweden, even the snow clearing had gender bias. A wise soul in Skane County once decided that he will prioritize the street and road cleaning over pedestrian walks. His rationale was simple. He thought by cleaning the road, he can increase the productivity. People can reach the location faster. And he completely ignored that pedestrian is a place where cyclists go, women usually uses them, the strollers are going by there, and he completely ignored that. And because of that, lot of accidents happen. And here is a data point for you. 16 million kroners were spent in a year just to treat two people who were meeting with accident because of uncleared pedestrian walk. Not to forget all the productivity which was lost. Not to forget a lot of people are not reporting who may have gone home without going to the hospital, and hence at large much more larger impact would have been there. Another classic example of gender bias and what it can do to you. For the longest period of time, New York Philharmonic Orchestra had only male musicians. There was some blip in the radar in 1950s and 60s, but by and large, it was a male-dominated game. This all changed in 1970 when, because of a lawsuit, the screening or selection of a musician was done behind a screen. So a musician will play behind a screen. The selectors would not know until they select them. Now look at the results. By 1980, the New York Philharmonic Orchestra had 50% female. Today, if you see, that population is about 45% female and 55% male. Another example of how gender bias usually make us believe that musician could be only male. But as soon as the screen was put between the gender, the ratio completely changed. The most interesting and intriguing example I can take in gender bias is the standard office temperature. The standard office temperature was decided in 1960 based upon the metabolic heart rate of a 40-year-old male who weighs about 154 pounds. Well, if you truly see, they have missed the mark by 35% because similar age, a female would have a lower metabolic rate. No wonder why when you walk in the office, you will see that female are wrapped around shawls or sweaters and cardigans because the office temperature is about 5% lower to them. Another classic example of how gender bias can drive behaviors which are not suitable for female. The most disturbing example I can take in gender bias is about clinical trials in medicine. Any medicine coming out in the market has to go through a rigorous process of testing in lab and the latter part on human beings, which are regulated and controlled by bodies such as FDA. While it is a known fact that human bodies are different for male and female, the clinical practitioners are recruiting more male patients than female, and the reasons are many. Two such examples I can take is one, they are not always readily available because they have other responsibilities, but most disturbing one is they have hormonal imbalance because of menstruation cycle, and because of that they do not want to recruit them because they may have different efficacy results on the medicine that they are testing on. And because of that, most of the medicines that we see in the market are actually tested and tried on male body, and it is generally assumed that it will work on female. Appalling, indeed it is. And that's what I want to bring to your attention. There's an implant known as CRTD, which is put inside the body to prevent heart attack. Today, it is prescribed to patients whose heart takes about 160 milliseconds to complete one electric wave. Well, there is a gender bias here as well, because a female heart can demonstrate similar disease state with 30 milliseconds lesser. But since it is tested on a male body, a female cannot get a CRTD unless their heart demonstrate a 160 millisecond or higher electric wave within their heart. Sad indeed. Oftentimes, young females are misdiagnosed for heart attack. Why? Because they do not have Hollywood-style heart attack with left arm pain or chest pain. Young female, when they have heart attack, their symptoms are usually breathlessness, nausea, stomach ache. According to doctors, these are atypical symptoms. Hence, the fatality because of heart attack within young female is much more higher. The most interesting example I can take in gender bias is GDP. When women started coming to workforce, the GDP of many countries increased multifold. While the fact remained, GDP actually didn't increase. It only shifted from home to office, from unpaid to paid. And that's the only difference. And that brings a larger debate point where I strongly believe that GDP should be calculated a little differently. We should talk about productivity of unpaid workers as well, which is mostly female, working at home, taking care of elders, cooking food, stitching clothes, and taking care of household activities. This brings an end to my gender bias video. I hope this video will give you a lot of food for thought. And those subtle hidden attributes we can all look at very deeply so that we can create an equitable world for all genders in the future. Thank you for listening.